Hey, so I'm Ryan, and for my movie review assignment, I chose to watch the movie 42. So just briefly, it's written and directed by Brian Helgeland. Came out in 2013 and stars Chadwick Boseman as Jackie Robinson and Harrison Ford as Branch Rickey. When it came out, the movie was pretty well received by critics, and for whatever it's worth, it got 81% on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah, I really enjoy the movie. It's probably one of my favorite movies. It's a really good movie about like the history of the civil rights movement in the United States and sports. So yeah, pretty good movie. Briefly going to the plot, it's a biographical story of Jackie Robinson. And for those of you who don't know, Jackie Robinson was the first African American man to play in the MLB. He was really the first African American athlete to break the color barrier, and it's a pretty big deal in the United States at the time. And obviously, there was a lot of criticism, and yeah, he went through a lot. And this movie kind of tells that story. All in all, yeah, Chadwick Boseman plays Jackie Robinson. I think he does a really good job at kind of capturing the emotion that I'd imagine Robinson was going through. Like his family is threatened and greeted with a lot of adversity and obviously racism. I think he does a pretty good job at it. Um, so yeah, so sorry, briefly the plot. So Jackie Robinson is playing in the Negro Leagues, and little backstory at the time. Baseball in America was divided into two different leagues. There's the Negro Leagues and the major leagues. And as you can probably assume from the name, the Negro Leagues was dedicated to African American players only, as they couldn't play in the MLB. Um, yeah, so Jackie Robinson is approached by a scout for the Brooklyn Dodgers and asked if he wants to come play for the Brooklyn Dodgers in the MLB. And at the time, obviously, this is a really controversial decision. But the Dodgers wanted to try to win the World Series, and Robinson was the best player in the Negro Leagues and goes down in baseball history as one of the best players in the MLB. So yeah, it's pretty good. The historical significance of the movie we haven't really covered it in class yet, but this movie's kind of a prelude to the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Like this took place in the 1940s, shortly after World War II, and the argument could be made that Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier kind of kind of kickstarted the desegregation movement in the United States. Yeah, like I said at the time, it was obviously a really controversial decision, and yeah, it was. But it ended up working out. Robinson, yeah, he did receive some support. A lot of African American people attended games, cheered him on, and there were even some teammates he had that would stand up for him. For example, a teammate he had, Pee Wee Reese, would make a point of putting his arm around him during games just to show that the team stood in solidarity with him. The impact he made on baseball and desegregation of the country, like can't really quantify it, but he kind of opened the door and paved the way for a lot of not only African American athletes, but African American people in American society to take on a larger role. Like Robinson, he was the first one, and it kind of helped him too. He was a really good baseball player, and it just his he let his play do the talking, and he changed the mind of a lot of Americans about their preconceived notions of African American people. Um, and yeah, in 1949, he finally decided to speak out and was obviously greeted by a lot of criticism. But that year, he batted 347 and was voted the National League's most valuable player. And from then on, he continued to speak out against racism his entire life. Um, yeah, it can be argued that he kind of kick-started the civil rights movements of the 50s and 60s, and like a kind of a result, like he changed the public's opinion, and a result of this was 1948, the year after he broke the color barrier. President Truman ordered the armed forces to desegregate, and then it kind of was dominoes after that. And yeah, anyway, I would recommend this movie to anyone interested in history of sports and history of civil rights in the United States. Thank you for listening.